Dennis Kozlowski walked into work on a Tuesday morning in 2002 with no idea that the empire he'd built was about to collapse, and that he'd be the one pulling the trigger. By the year 2000, Tyco International was a $37 billion colossus. Kozlowski had engineered the company's rise through relentless acquisition strategy, buying up smaller firms, consolidating fire suppression systems, security equipment, undersea cables. Each deal seemed rational, each one expanded shareholder value on paper, but the CEO wasn't thinking about shareholders anymore. He was thinking about what a man of his stature deserved to own. What Kozlowski didn't fully grasp yet, though the numbers were there for anyone willing to look, was that his acquisition strategy was beginning to mask something darker. The company's actual operational earnings weren't matching the narrative. Tyco was growing, yes, but it was growing through borrowed money and accounting maneuvers, not genuine profit. The pressure to maintain that growth story was immense. Miss a quarter and the stock collapses. The board turns on you. Your legacy evaporates. By 1999, Kozlowski began authorizing what would eventually total nearly $400 million in loans to himself and other executives. These weren't documented as loans at first, not clearly. They were framed as bonuses for given debt relocation packages. A man earning $70 million a year in salary and stock doesn't need $400 million more, but he took it anyway. The first major withdrawal happened quietly, recorded in footnotes of SEC filings that no analyst was reading closely enough. Then came the apartments. Kozlowski purchased a $31 million penthouse on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, not with his own money that would have required scrutiny. Tyco paid for it. Tyco also paid for the furnishings, $17 million worth of furniture, art, and decoration. A single birthday party for his wife cost $1 million. These weren't discretionary expenses approved by a board. They were decisions made by a man who'd convinced himself that his compensation package gave him the authority to spend company money however he saw fit. The problem wasn't that Kozlowski was stupid. He wasn't. He was operating under a specific kind of pressure that powerful executives face, the pressure to maintain an image of invincibility. In his mind, a CEO of a $37 billion company doesn't live in an ordinary home. He doesn't attend modest parties. The lifestyle wasn't corruption, it was a logical extension of his position. That's how he rationalized it. That's what he told himself at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. What Kozlowski still didn't fully understand in 2001, though auditors were beginning to ask questions, was how close the entire structure was to unraveling. Tyco's growth was slowing. The dot-com bubble had burst. Investors were finally reading those footnotes. The loans to executives, the related party transactions, the aggressive accounting practices, they were all starting to look less like shrewd strategy and more like desperation. In June 2002, the board finally moved. Kozlowski resigned as CEO, claiming he needed to focus on his legal defense against a tax evasion charge in New York, a relatively minor issue compared to what was about to come. He left with a severance package worth $137 million. Even in his exit, he extracted maximum value. The board had calculated that paying him off quietly was cheaper than a public fight. 3 months later, in September 2002, federal prosecutors unsealed charges. Kozlowski was arrested and charged with grand larceny, conspiracy, and falsifying business records. The specifics were devastating. He looted the company of approximately $137 million through unauthorized bonuses and loans. His CFO, Mark Schwartz, faced identical charges. Together, they'd stolen more than $250 million from shareholders who had no idea what was happening to their money. The full scope of the fraud emerged in discovery. Beyond the personal loans and apartment purchases, Tyco had been engaged in an elaborate scheme to hide debt and manipulate earnings. The company had acquired smaller firms and immediately written off enormous costs as one-time charges, making subsequent quarters look artificially profitable. Kozlowski had signed off on all of it. He hadn't just stolen money. He'd orchestrated a systematic misrepresentation of the company's financial health to the market. The trial lasted 5 months. Kozlowski sat in the courtroom day after day, watching witnesses testify about his decisions. Board members who trusted him, employees whose retirement savings had been decimated, shareholders whose wealth had evaporated. The defense argued that he'd been authorized to take the loans, that the board had approved his compensation package implicitly. The prosecution countered that he'd systematically hidden the extent of his withdrawals and falsified documents to conceal them. On June 17, 2005, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Kozlowski was convicted of stealing $137 million from Tyco. Schwartz received the same sentence. Kozlowski would spend 8.5 years in prison, released in 2014 after serving his time. By then, Tyco's stock had collapsed from $53 per share to pennies. Shareholders lost roughly $99 billion in market capitalization. The company that Kozlowski had built through acquisition after acquisition was systematically dismantled. The calculus Kozlowski made in 1999 was simple: take the money now because the opportunity won't last forever. The pressure to maintain growth, the ability to rationalize his spending as justified, the confidence that auditors wouldn't look too closely, all of it converged into a decision. He didn't see himself as a thief. He saw himself as a visionary executive claiming what he'd earned. That gap between self-perception and reality is where most white-collar criminals live. What makes Tyco's collapse instructive isn't that Kozlowski was uniquely greedy. It's that the structure that enabled him, aggressive accounting, acquisitions used to mask earnings problems, boards that rubber-stamped executive compensation, wasn't unusual. It was standard practice in the late 1990s. Tyco just got caught. Kozlowski just got prosecuted. Thousands of executives made similar calculations that year and faced no consequences. He was unlucky, not uniquely criminal. The Tyco scandal became one of the catalyst events for Sarbanes-Oxley in 2002, legislation that imposed stricter accounting oversight and required CEOs to certify their financial statements personally. Executives could no longer hide behind plausible deniability. If the numbers were fraudulent, they were legally responsible. Kozlowski's decision to spend $400 million on himself, made when he thought he was untouchable, ultimately changed the rules for everyone who came after. The larger lesson cuts deeper. Kozlowski had every advantage: intelligence, experience, access to the best advisors. What he lacked was the ability to resist the pressure of his own success. The bigger the company grew, the more justified his spending felt. The more he spent, the more he had to hide. The more he hid, the more aggressive his accounting had to become. Each decision led logically to the next. By the time he realized what he'd done, the structure had become too elaborate to unwind. Kozlowski was released from prison in 2014. He'd lost everything: his company, his reputation, his freedom. In interviews, he's expressed regret. Whether that's genuine remorse or the calculated response of a man who spent years thinking about what went wrong is impossible to know. What we do know is that he made a series of rational decisions under pressure, each one seeming justified at the moment. That collectively destroyed a $37 billion enterprise and cost shareholders nearly $100 billion. The Tyco case remains a masterclass in how institutional pressure, combined with the ability to rationalize, can push a capable executive toward catastrophic decisions. He didn't wake up one morning and decide to commit fraud. He made incremental choices: a loan here, a property there, an accounting adjustment to smooth earnings. The system enabled him. The culture rewarded him. And then suddenly it all collapsed. Subscribe to follow the next corporate collapse, where ambition meets reckoning.